hit record. There we are. So,
We will talk about the assignment already, Pastor Tim?
What's that?
We will talk about the assignment already?
Yeah, we're going to get to it in a minute here. But I want to first, yeah, you're going to give us, you're going to present it to us, right? Because you have all the answers correct, right, Pastor Bobby? You know, I'm reminded, you know, we've been spending a lot of time on grammar. And I'm reminded of, you know, when the Pharisees were confronting Jesus, and Jesus was talking about brother Abraham, and then he made this statement: before Abraham was, I am. Before Abraham was born, I am. And I think that little statement said so much. You know, he's obviously making a connection to the fact that he is divine, that you know, Yahweh is the one who said I am. But even too, just if you think about the grammar there in that statement, that he was intentional about that, what he said, and, you know, because grammatically he should have used the past tense, but he used the present tense there when he said I am. And ego eimi, you know, in Greek, it's the present tense, first person, I am. And I think just there's little details like that, that just the subtleties of and when you understand the grammar, the better you understand it, the more you can see just subtle things that are given in the scripture that really depend upon understanding how grammar works. And, you know, again, the authors, their intent is to communicate truth, and they do it through the vehicle of language. And the language that they were using had specific rules and guides. And so whenever they either deviate from those rules, that's an important thing to notice. But also too, whenever, you know, there's this, you pay attention very closely to, is this a noun? Is it a plural noun? What kind of conjunction is used here? What tense? What's the tense of the verb? I mean, those are important questions to get to the meaning of the passage. And you know, I just want to continue to encourage us to persevere and keep doing our best in understanding, and ask God to help give us that understanding. But at the end of the day, you know, this is not a grammar class that we're in. This is a class on, or a time together to figure out how to study the word accurately and clearly. And so the grammar is a means to that end. It's a tool for us to get there. And so at the same time, we're not going to cover every aspect of grammar, but I'm trying to hit what I think are important parts to try to help us see how the English language works. And again, because it's very similar to the Greek language, Greek grammar, I think that it helps us in our study of the scripture. And so I do want to get to that assignment that I had asked you guys to work on, and that is regarding the Ephesians chapter 6. And to get us there, let me just review just a couple of key points that we discussed last week and the week before regarding conjunctions. Okay. Again, we're reminded of that we're in the step where we're trying to identify phrases and clauses, and those phrases and clauses become evident when we identify the connector words. And again, the connector words are so important because they show us the beginning of each phrase or clause. They're like the breakpoints. As I mentioned last time with the bricks, they're like the mortar between the bricks. They not only separate or join the bricks, but they also, in a sense, separate them. So you can tell one brick from another based upon the mortar around it. And so that's what connecting words do. They connect the phrases and clauses, but they also serve as like the borders. So I know that a connector word will introduce a phrase or a clause. And so when I get to the next connector word, I know that that is the end of that phrase or clause. So, for example, you know, if I were to say I ran home with my friend who was who ran, I'll say it this way, who ran faster than me. All right. Now here we've got a sentence. The main independent clause is I ran home, but then we have these connector words, right? I'll just highlight them in yellow. All right. So I know that with my friend is a phrase because it begins with this preposition, and then there's a relative pronoun that begins the next clause in this case. And so the connector word not only shows me where my phrase begins, but the connector word also shows me where it ends. And so with my friend is a phrase that begins with, and then I know it ends at friend because the next word is who, which is another connector word. And so, like I said, these connector words act like the mortar between the bricks. They join the bricks together, but they also show us each separate brick. All right. And so the types of connector words, and our focus has been conjunctions. We talked a little about prepositions as well, and we're going to get back to those. But we talked last week about conjunctions, and I focused our attention on how do we identify them. You know, let's say that you've got this paragraph, and you encountered Ephesians 6, you know, this week as you were looking through it, and you're going through it, and you're maybe asking yourself at times, okay, is this a conjunction or is it something else? I know it's a connector word, or it seems to be a connector word, but I'm not sure what kind it is. So how would you know? How would you know if you have a conjunction? Well, there's two steps here that I want to give you, and we covered this last week, but I want to review it as we prepare for looking at Ephesians 6, is again, we remember that prepositions, they connect a noun to the word they modify, but conjunctions can connect a clause. Coordinating conjunctions can connect a noun, but we can identify them easily by and boy. All right, so we know what the coordinating conjunctions are just by if it's and, nor, but, or, and then yet. Those are the five, right, that make up and boy. So basically the procedure is this. How do we identify a conjunction? If there's a word that we're not sure, but we think it's a conjunction, but we don't know, first, go through your passage. I should put that first. Go through the passage and identify the coordinating conjunctions. All right, so just look first for the coordinating conjunctions. Do I see an and, a nor, a but, an or, a yet? Okay, do that first. And then the second step is go through the passage again and identify the subordinating conjunctions. And how do we know if it's a subordinating conjunction? It'll be followed by a clause. Okay, now there's another connecting word that's followed by a clause, and that is the relative pronouns who, whom, or that, who, which, or that. But you can identify those easily because you know the word who. If it's who, which, or that, it's a relative pronoun, not a conjunction. So you can eliminate those. All right, so let's do this example together, and hopefully as we do it, it's the same thing we did last week, but as we go through Ephesians 6 together, I'm hoping that just by repetition, you'll be able to see how this works, okay? And again, the importance of this is when we identify a subordinating conjunction, that tells us by definition that the clause which follows it is dependent. That's the important part of all this. A coordinating conjunction, it connects words, phrases, or clauses, but when it connects clauses, it can connect independent or dependent clauses, all right? It connects a lot of things. But a subordinating conjunction always connects a dependent clause. And that's significant when we're trying to interpret the passage because dependent clauses modify something else. They don't stand alone. They're not the main point. They support something about the main point. And so that's important to know exegetically. All right, so what I'd like to do is we're going to go through the Ephesians 6 passage together, and we're going to go a verse at a time, or maybe a couple verses at a time. I'll just call on one of you, and remember the procedure. First, look for and boy, look for the coordinating conjunctions, and then come back, and then we'll see if there are any subordinating conjunctions by putting them to the test. All right, about if they're followed by a clause or not. Okay, so we'll start with Sir Sid, and Sid, let me give you. Let's do this. Let me give you these 3 verses. All right. Or let me do this. Just take 2. We'll do 2 verses at a time. So just give me verses 10 and 11. All right. So the first step is just see if you can identify any coordinating conjunctions. And then after that, see if you can identify any other conjunctions. Make sure to unmute yourself too.
There is no coordinating conjunction, only subordinating. So that.
Okay, so that. All right, so you don't see any others?
How about finally?
Finally, okay, that's a good one to think about. Hold on a second. Let me go down here. Put that here. Okay. All right. So finally, question. We're not sure. So that. Finally.
So that subordinating.
Okay, is a question mark, and then that's it. That's all you see.
And there is an and.
There's an and.
Lord and.
Okay, good. So yeah, let's just break down verse 10 first. So let's do the steps. First, we identify the coordinating conjunctions, and again, we see one. There's an and there, right?
And.
Now what is the and connecting here?
In the Lord, in the strength.
Okay, good. In the Lord, in the strength. Good. 2 prepositional phrases. All right, good. So it's connecting 2 phrases there. And then you mentioned so that as a subordinating.
So.
Oh, sorry. Finally.
Subordinating.
Sorry, we're at finally. So you have a question. Is finally a conjunction here?
It's a conjunction.
And what's the test?
It's not with the amboy.
It's not amboy.
It's not with the whiff.
And it's
whiff
not.
Boat. It's not with the whiff. In the whiff boat.
Not a preposition. Not one of those prepositions. But remember, what's the test to determine if it is a subordinating conjunction or not? By what follows it, right?
Followed by a clause.
Yeah, it is followed by a clause here, isn't it?
It's
strong.
Followed by be strong is a command.
Yes, there's a subject.
Be strong in the Lord. There's
and a verb,
you.
right? Yes. So in this case, it is followed by a clause. And what did we say before? If it's followed by a clause,
coordinating.
Then it's
subordinating.
It's followed by a clause, therefore it is a subordinating conjunction.
Subordinating conjunction.
All right, that's the test. But finally, be strong. So finally is in some way it's subordinating. Now it's beginning the verse. So it's beginning this paragraph actually, because remember, verse 9 ended the previous paragraph in Ephesians where he was talking about walk in wisdom And then he gave the examples of husbands and wives, children and parents, and then slaves and masters. And so that was the what is it, the fifth walk command, I think, in Ephesians. And then in verse 10, he's introducing a new subject, a focus. He's talking about the armor of God, and he introduces it with a subordinating conjunction finally. So it's not a completely new thought. It's a subordinate thought to things that he's been sharing previously. All right. It's part of the response to who we are in Christ. Again, remember the structure of Ephesians chapters 1 to 3 is what God has done in Christ and our salvation. Chapters 4 to 6 are the response to that. And so what Paul does in chapters 4 to 6 is he breaks it up into these walk commands, and they're all introduced by subordinating conjunctions because they are in response to what God has done in Christ in chapters 1 to 3. And so this last conjunction finally is introducing the last response to what God has done, to the last of our response to what God has done for us in Christ. And that is we are to, and then he's going to address the topic of spiritual warfare. Okay? Be strong is how he introduces this. So that finally is one of those conjunctions introducing a new paragraph in this case. All right? And we know
Pastor Tim, finally can be equivalent to therefore?
Yes. In this case, yes.
It's equivalently saying therefore?
Yeah. It's a final therefore. It's like some might say lastly. Okay, there he's
Lastly,
giving a list of statements.
A series.
Yeah. But in this case, we know it's followed by a clause, therefore it's a conjunction here. All right? Now, verse 11, you just noted there was no amboy, but you did notice the words so that. Okay? And again, notice it's followed by a clause. You guys see that? You is the subject. Will be able is the verb. Okay? So we know that so that is a conjunction. Subordinating conjunction. So let me remind you of this this process, okay? Because what I'm trying to do here is help you identify words within the passage, these connector words, and identify what they are, because that'll help you be able to interpret what they're doing. And so we had, again, these four kinds, and I know we haven't covered the other ones very much yet in detail, and we're going to get to those, but I wanted to bring it up here. Remember, conjunctions, we have two kinds. We have the coordinating, that's amboy, and the coordinating conjunctions, they join words, phrases, clauses, all right? They're a special class. They join together grammatically equal sets of word, phrases, or clauses. And then we have the subordinating, and that joins a dependent clause. Okay? Now, in the case of the subordinating conjunctions, they are always followed by a clause. Okay? Prepositions, always followed by a noun, not a clause, a noun. Okay? Relative pronouns, always followed by a dependent clause. Now you might say, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Pastor Tim, you just said subordinating conjunctions are also followed by a clause. How would I know which one it is? How would I know if it's a subordinating conjunction or if it's a relative pronoun? Well, the nice thing is the relative pronouns are just a few. Who, which, and that.
Which.
Now there are variations, whoever, whom, whichever, but
Whatever.
basically, sometimes whatever. Basically, if you can memorize those three words, who, which, and that, those are my relative pronouns. So if I'm looking at a sentence and I see a clause in the sentence, and I know if we have a connector word followed by a clause, so this tells us if I have a connector word followed by a clause, then the connector word is either a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun. And the easy way to know which it is the relative pronoun is just, is it who, which, or that? That's all I need to know. If it is not one of those words, then I know it's a subordinating conjunction. So if I go back to here and I see, okay, so that. It's okay, so that. I know it's a connector word. I'm not sure what kind, but it's followed by this clause because I see my subject and my verb. Okay, it's followed by a clause, so I know it's either a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun. Okay, but I look back at the word so that it is not who, which, or that, so I know it's a subordinating conjunction. Okay, now participles, they are usually followed by a noun or phrase, not a clause. Okay, not typically. All right, so if you have a clause, it's going to be either subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun. And again, the list of relative pronouns is really short, easy to memorize. In fact, my encouragement to you, I don't know if I said this before, is memorize these three things. All right, and it'll help you. You'll have it'll get you a good starting point for this kind of analysis, looking at connector words to identify connector words. All right, memorize amboy. All right, we know that one. And, nor. Sid, what are the other three?
But or yet.
Okay, so those are my coordinating conjunctions. So memorize amboy, and I've got basically all the coordinating conjunctions. All right, and memorize, and we just introduced this before. Remember, this was, anyone remember these? These are the prepositions. Remember what A is? At. What's W?
With.
Good.
With.
In.
In. For.
Good.
From.
What's the B?
Out. B is before.
No, it's actually by. By is more
By.
common.
By.
And then O.
On.
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 Of. And finally,
On. To.
two. Good. All right. Those are the 9 most common prepositions. Okay. There's 150 prepositions, but nobody here is going to memorize 150 prepositions. I mean, I guess you could, but something might be wrong with you if you want to memorize 150 English prepositions. But 9 of them is doable. I think 9 you can memorize. And these are the 9 most common. In fact, I think the words of, to, and what was the other one?
In
I don't
for.
remember if it was in or for, are the three of the 10 most common words in English. And is another one, by the way. So if you can memorize these 9 prepositions, that will cover a good number. And then finally, memorize the relative pronouns. Who, which, that. Now there are some other variations, like I said, whom, whoever,
Whichever,
whichever. But notice the word who or which is part of those. So if you see who or which, whether it's in the part of a word or the full word, you know it's a relative pronoun. So just memorize those three. Okay? So basically, I'm telling you, memorize these 17 words, and that's really going to help you in identifying these connector words more quickly. Okay? Now, there's a number of subordinating conjunctions. You know, some people they've come up with different acronyms to try to memorize them. And I just, you know, to me, I'd rather just look at the sentence. And if I can see a subject verb, I know I've got a clause. And then I know if that clause is not introduced by one of these three relative pronouns, I know that that it's a subordinating conjunction. I don't have to memorize all of them. Just like what Sid did in this verse here, verse 10. He asked the question about finally, right? So is finally a subordinating conjunction? Well, that's a good question. It seems like it's a connector word of some sort. And so I look at it and say, well, okay, well, it's followed by be strong. Well, that's a clause because I see a verb, and I know because it's a command, the subject is you. So I have a clause here. Okay. Well, and the clause is not being introduced by who. This is not who here, right? He's introducing it with the word finally. Do this. Okay, it's finally that's introducing it. So I know finally is a subordinating conjunction because it's followed by this sentence. I don't have to memorize all the subordinating conjunctions that start with F, because I can just follow the process. By definition, a subordinating conjunction introduces a clause. So does a relative pronoun. But finally is not a relative pronoun because I memorized the three core relative pronouns, who, which, and that. And it's not one of those. And it's followed by a clause. So it must be a subordinating conjunction. And it's not a coordinating conjunction because it's not and boy, because I memorized and boy. You see how this works? It's like the process of elimination. I think it can be really helpful because as we go through this passage, there'll be a few words that just it's not clear if what kind of connector word it is. But if you can just remember these principles here that I brought up, and then if you memorize these 17 words, it's really going to help. Okay? So that's my encouragement to you. Memorize these 17 words, and they're all short words, by the way, and you can remember two of them just by the list, and boy and a with boot. And then the third group is just who, which, and that. It's really simple. Okay? And that will really help you in this whole process that we're doing of identifying the connector words. All right? Let's keep going in our Ephesians 6 passage. I'm going to ask Pastor Allen to take this one on. And what I want you to do, brother, is again, just identify first I'm wondering if we should let's do it this way. No, we'll do it this way. Okay, identify first the coordinating conjunctions, and then identify subordinating conjunctions.
For our struggles not against flesh and blood. And
okay, in verse 12.
Flesh and blood.
Okay, good.
Verse 12, blood.
All right. Good. Any other amboys?
but
Yep,
but against the rulers, against the world forces of this, against the spiritual forces of darkness. This is coordinating, therefore. Only conjunctions.
okay, those are the only coordinating ones you see. What about verse 13?
So that,
Okay, so that
how about the therefore?
therefore, well, we can put a question mark. Oh, so let's do it this way. So you found and then a but. Were there any other coordinating conjunctions?
There's another end.
Okay, good.
And having done.
Okay, good. And then the subordinating, you saw so that, and then we had a question
So-
about therefore. You see any others?
How about the for? Verse 12.
Okay, verse 12, the for. Okay, good. You see any others?
I think that's all.
Oh, sorry, I didn't and. Okay. Okay. So let's first consider the coordinating ones. The first and, what is it joining? The and in verse 12.
It's joining, is that a noun?
Yeah,
It's a blood.
flesh and blood.
Flesh and
Yeah,
blood.
this joins flesh with blood. Yeah, and these are just, again, as I said, coordinating conjunctions can coordinate words, phrases, or clauses. So here it's joining these two nouns, which are words, right? Okay, now what about the but? What is the but joining?
Against the rulers.
And what's it joining it to?
The rulers. I think it's noun.
Our struggle.
Okay, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers.
It's a contrast.
It's a contrast, and it's contrasting what? What's it contrasting here?
Flesh and blood and rulers.
Yes, with flesh and blood.
Flesh and
See that? And we even have a clue here because it says against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces, this darkness. All right, so if we were to, let me just diagram it real quick so you can see this visually. Our struggle is not against flesh, and then we have a coordinating conjunction, so we put it under what it's coordinating with. And then the but is contrasting here. And we have this list. All right.
A series of against.
It's a series. And in this case, there's no connector word. It's just separated by, oops.
An imaginary conjunction, comma.
Yes. It's separated by a comma, which is acting like a coordinating conjunction and, right?
A punctuation.
Okay. So notice the but here is contrasting. It's connecting against flesh and against blood. It's contrasting it with against the rulers, powers, etc. All right. So I put the but right under here because notice that's the word being contrasted against flesh, being contrasted with rulers, powers, all these below. See that? So in this case, the first coordinating conjunction was joining these two words. The next coordinating conjunction is actually joining these prepositional phrases because the word against is a preposition.
Okay, okay.
Now, how do I know the word against is a preposition? I just made a
Followed
statement.
by a noun. It's followed by a noun.
It is followed by a noun. Okay? I know it's not a participle because there's not an ing verb here. And I know it's not a subordinating conjunction. So it must be, it's a noun, rulers, powers, world forces, flesh, those are all nouns. So against is functioning as a preposition here because it's followed by a noun, not a clause. Okay? Now again, you could memorize the whole list of 150 prepositions if you want, or just look at what the connector word is connecting. All right? We have a connector word. Oh, we didn't talk about for yet, so we'll have to wait on that. But here I have a connector word against. What kind of a connector word is it? Well, I've got my four options here. Is it followed by a noun? Is it followed by a clause? Is it followed by basically, or a phrase? Well, it's followed by a noun, okay? So, and it's not amboy, so it must either be a preposition or the other option is a participle, but like I said, it can't be a participle because it's not, against is not an ing verb, okay? Now, if it had said something like our struggle, what would it be? I can't even think of a way to say that. Will be our struggle is not fighting flesh and blood, but fighting the ruler's power. You know, I could have used this. So now I've got an ing verb here. All right. That would be an example where you could have a noun following another kind of word, an ing verb. But in this case, it was the word against, which is not an ing verb. So it must be preposition. We'll practice that more. So if you're not tracking with me yet, that's okay, because we're going to talk about that when we cover prepositions in more detail. I just thought I would throw that in here right now for you to think about. Okay, so we have let me skip down here to this verse 12, will be a little clearer. All right, so we talked about and, that first and joins flesh with blood. And then we talked about the second and, or but, excuse me, the but joins against the rulers, and then there's that list, with against flesh and blood. Okay? And then I think Alan had mentioned the word for, and he asked, is for a subordinating conjunction? Well, let's put it to the test. What follows it?
A noun.
Well, here we have, go ahead.
Plural.
Yeah.
Yes, it's functioning as a Pastor Tim. It's a preposition functioning as a conjunction.
Yeah, it's in this case, it is the word immediately following is a pronoun, but does that pronoun stand by itself?
Yes.
Think about it a minute.
It follows a sentence. As a clause. It follows a clause.
It's a clause because our is the sub. We have a verb here. You see that? Or sorry, is. We have a verb is. So struggle is against, not against flesh and blood. So that's a clause. Our struggle is the noun. The verb is. So you don't stop at the word are, right? Why is that?
So it's a coordinating conjunction.
Well, remember, coordinating conjunction would be an amboy. Is it an amboy?
No.
Not
No.
amboy. Okay, so it's not amboy. But
the sense tells us
It is subordinating conjunction. Cause and effect.
yes.
I'm thinking of what went before.
Yeah, it's connected somehow to
It
something.
sounds like it is connecting to something which
Yeah.
was said
It's the
before.
cause. It's the cause and effect. It serves as because. It's equivalent to the word because.
Yeah, if we go back to our full passage, put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Why do I need to stand firm against the schemes of the devil? Because our struggle is not against flesh and blood. So it's actually modifying stand firm to stand firm. So you're right, Alan. It does go back, and it goes back actually, I believe, immediately to this verb here, to stand firm. Why must, answering the question why. I must stand firm because our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Technically, it's this whole, I must stand firm against the schemes of the devil because our struggle is not against human beings, it's against Satan, is this paraphrase. Okay?
Pastor Tim, we may go back to our main sentence. Be strong.
Be strong.
Be strong because our struggle is not against.
Is it possible if you were going to connect it also to be strong in the Lord? Because
Yeah,
yes,
that's a
it's possible.
possibility. Yeah, and that would be something grammatically, both are possible. Both follow the rules of grammar, but for
We follow the more immediate phrase. It modifies.
yeah, so this is where we'd have to kind of, from the context, ask ourselves, which is it? So for example, let me just put in that you be strong. How? Let me just diagram it to show you the possibilities here. Okay, so we have one command, be strong. We have a second command, you put on the full armor of God. And why must you put it on? So that you will be able to stand firm. That's actually a whole schemes of the devil. And then we have this word for. So where does this word for go to? We know it's not a new thought. Okay, it's a subordinating conjunction in the midst of this paragraph. So either it can go to, we've mentioned two places so far, it can go to stand firm. Okay, so it could be answering why I need to stand firm, or
put on, sir. Put on full
why
armor.
I need to be strong. Right? That's what I heard one of you say. It could be,
Verse 11, put on the full armor of God.
yeah, well, because these are parallel, right? Independent clauses, it would go to both. Put on and trying to draw this. So it would either go to, it would go to be strong and put on, because those are both commands, or, so you have three options here. Could go to could modify to stand firm, to put on, or put on and be strong. You see that? Does everyone follow me? So this for could be modifying. It could be like this, under stand firm, or it could be under put on, or it could be under put on and be strong, because those are parallel commands. So grammatically, all are allowed. Okay? They're all grammatically, they don't break any grammatical rules. Okay? But the question is then, so then we have to talk about in context, what makes the most sense? Does it, now a strong case is, you know, as Pastor Bobby said, it's going to go to the closest possible option. And that would be to stand firm. Why do we need to stand firm against the schemes of the devil? Because our struggle is against, not against humans, it's against the devil. So I need to stand firm against him. And I stand firm, how? By putting on the armor of God and by being strong in the Lord. In this case, putting on the armor of God. That's one option. The next option is, it's the second closest, is to put on. Put on the full armor of God, because our struggle is not against flesh and blood. That doesn't seem to make as much sense. That doesn't connect as clearly, I don't think. And then the third option is, it goes to both of these commands. And I think because he mentions flesh and blood here is not against, and he just mentioned the devil, to me it makes the most sense in the context here, the immediate context, for it to go with stand firm. But that's another discussion. The key thing I want you to see is, one, that the for is a subordinating conjunction. So that tells us that this following sentence here is subordinating. So it's modifying something. All right. So we know that because of the kind of conjunction it is. Now, what it modifies, that's a question we have to think about and answer that from the context. And like I said, perhaps the nearest possible option is can be a strong argument sometimes for it as well.
Or in preaching, we can make citations of that subordinating phrase to all three.
To all three?
Yeah.
That would be that'd be unusual.
Can we make citation?
Oh, I see. You mean when you're
Make
preaching
citation.
it, can you give all
Yeah,
three options? Is that what you're asking?
Make citations for all three.
You can, but I think you should be able to come to wrestle with it and come to a conclusion. Right, when we're preaching, it's best to give what we believe the answer is, rather than just give all the options and let the people figure it out. Or you can go through each option and then show why you think, you know, one of the options is the best. That's fine to do. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, that was what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine to do. It's kind of one of those, you have to be careful. How much of the exegesis do I bring into the sermon? You know, so if you go through each, so the first option is this, the second option is this, the third option is this. You have to ask yourself, what would be the value to go through that whole exercise in the sermon? Sometimes that's important to do. Maybe I would do it for things like if I'm on a topic that there's a lot of controversy or a lot of opinions that people know about. So I would know my congregation is aware of these different teachings on it. I might go through the different views of a particular passage. But typically I won't do that unless I feel like it's necessary for the people to have that broader understanding. You know, like for example, if I was teaching John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now I might get into the fact that, you know, there's no article in front of God. So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Because Jehovah's Witnesses will say that there's no article, therefore you should translate it, the Word was a God. Have you guys heard about that? Yeah, and so I think people in the congregation might have heard about that. So I might go through a few options with them and discuss that and the different views and why the translation, the Word was God, is the correct translation. Because if I know people in my congregation have heard that, or if, you know, people in my congregation, they have family members who are Jehovah's Witnesses, so I know they've talked about that. So then I might go through the different views to equip my people, because I know that's an issue that they're confronted with. But
I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I heard one Jehovah's Witness theologian said that was God means that Jesus was, that was before, but that was no more. So he that's how he explained the word was. Okay, and it is already past tense. He said when he got born here on the earth, he was not God anymore. He lost his deity.
Yeah.
So that's how he explained it away.
Yeah, I've heard that used before, but that really betrays a lack of understanding of the Greek language. Like the argument that there's no article, you know, articles is the word the. There's no article before theos, therefore it's God little g, not God capital G. He was a God. Is another grammatical error that they commit in that. So,
Mr. Tim,
yeah.
going back for this with regard to 4-hour struggle, can I understand that we should connect this to the nearest, stand firm. But if I'm going to pitch it with using the what and why with regard to uh, uh, the reason why we should be strong, why we should be put on, or why we should be standing firm against the schemes of the devil, or this is answering the question why we should be strong in the Lord, why we should put on. If I will going to preach that like that, is it correct also, or we're just uh, uh, connect this or connect this to strictly connect this to the nearest command, which is stand firm.
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. there's a couple reasons when I preach through this passage, when I studied it, that I put it here. And I'll tell you why. Let me make this. There were two reasons that come to my mind right now anyway. One was that it is the nearest verb that it could modify. Okay? That's just one reason. Now, that's not always the case. Again, it is possible that it could be modifying the other words here, okay? But the second reason that I believed within the immediate context that it was modifying stand firm was because Paul included a so that here to tell me, why must I put on the armor of God? And why must I be strong in the Lord? So that I will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. So I don't think he gave two reasons for this command. See that?
Now it's clear. Yeah, I understand.
Aman ni siya butang.
Now, if he had said, so that you will be able to stand firm,
So that is the immediate answer to why we should be strong and why we should put on our full armor.
I think so. And then that this is a reason to stand firm. Now, and the third reason was because of the contrast with flesh and blood and the devil. And then he said, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but then he said, right, but against the rulers, right, and etc. And those all refer to, demons. Okay, so I think it made more sense that he was contrasting or addressing the statement schemes of the devil because he put in flesh and blood, this contrast between human and demons. And so he brought demons up in the phrase, the clause right before.
So it's like the first command in verse 10 and the second in verse 11. Those two commands are actually answering the how to stand firm. You be strong in the Lord. You put on the full armor of God. It's like answering how to stand firm.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like to that effect.
Or why? It's sorry, that's better. Yeah, it's a result. Thank you. That's a better understanding. So be strong and put on the full armor of God so that as a result, you'll be able to stand firm. That's what you're saying, right,
Yeah.
Pastor Allen? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's more accurate. And so that can function that way as a result. A reason or a result. In this case, a result. So the result, if I'm strong, if I'm and notice, did we talk about this? We did. You remember this discussion we had here? What kind of verb is this? You remember what's the tense?
That's present.
Present tense. And is it imperative, indicative, interrogative?
Imperative.
It's an imperative. It's a
Imperative.
command. And then is it active or passive?
Active.
Active.
No. Passive.
Passive.
Yeah.
Notice the be strong.
Okay.
Okay.
So here he's saying, finally, you be strong, and that actually comes from the Lord, right? It's the Lord who makes us strong. Put on the full armor of God, and when you do both of these commands, you'll be able to stand firm. This is powerful, man, because there's a lot of false teaching about spiritual warfare, isn't there?
Mhm.
That you must bind Satan and you must, walk around the house or walk around the person and condemn Satan and cast him out and right, all of this. Because, well, that's what the apostles did. That's what Jesus did in the Gospels. Yeah, but remember,
Like,
what's that? Go ahead.
like Kenneth Copeland does. Kenneth
Yeah,
Copeland.
there's a huge list. Huge list of guys. But let me
Did you
ask
see his
what's that?
video? He commanded COVID-19.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Looking for good, no?
Yeah, it's I grew up exposed to a lot of that, and just a lot of demons being blamed for everything. I read a book. A guy said there's demons, the demon of pride, the demon of sex, the demon of lust, the demon of greed, the demon, and he named all these sins, but he said it was the demons that were the problem, not the fact that I have a sinful heart. So it was teaching people to look for, okay, you're struggling with drinking alcohol. Well, let me see. You have the demon of alcoholism in I need to cast him out. I'm going to rebuke him.
Looking for someone to blame.
Yeah. And so they say, well, because if you look in the New Testament, if you look in the Gospels, the book of Acts, they were casting out demons. And so that's what we need to do too. But we have to think about this for a minute. You remember when we talked about in class narratives, where a narrative, remember there was two principles of interpretation when it comes to, we have the descriptive and the prescriptive principle. Okay? Does anybody remember, can tell me what these are? You guys remember?
Descriptive is merely describing.
Direct.
Prescriptive is commanding for us to take active step, to take action.
Okay, good. So, yeah, descriptive is merely describing what happened. Okay, so if you're reading a story in the Gospels or Old Testament, if you're reading a story, it's just telling you what happened, right? That's descriptive. One day, Pastor Bobby and I were walking down the street, and Pastor Bobby was hungry. And so he bent over and picked up a rock and ate the rock. And then he was thirsty, and he found a puddle of oil and he drank the oil. Now we could say, and this happens in the Old Testament all the time. I hear it in sermons, where just because Joseph or David or Solomon or some Abraham, some Bible character who take Abraham or David, for example, and he does something and say, well, Abraham was generally a godly man, and so we need to follow his example. Well, you got to be careful with that. Pastor Bobby's a godly man, but I'm not going to go eat rocks and drink oil just because he did it, right?
Tim, David took several wives.
Yeah, there's a good example, right? David took several wives.
Abraham lied.
Lied, right?
600, Solomon 600 and 300.
So just because they did something doesn't mean we're supposed to do it too. All right. Just because one of the apostles, I heard this argument used. I was in a church one time, and there was a disagreement among the elders, and it was pretty serious. And it was over a matter of one of the elders' character. He had disqualified himself by his behavior, but there was disagreement among the elders as to whether he had disqualified himself. And so one of the elders you know, there was this argument over this issue, and one of the elders said, "Well, you know, it's okay that we disagree. Disagreement's just part of the church, and we just need to live with it." And then he gives an example of when Paul and Barnabas disagreed in Acts 15. Remember that? It said they had a heated argument and they parted ways. And so he was saying, you know what, so we just aren't agreeing, so we just need to part ways, just like Paul and Barnabas. Now, think about that a minute. Is that what Paul taught us in Ephesians? Is that being diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace? I mean, just because Paul and Barnabas had an argument and split up doesn't justify a church split because we don't agree, right? You follow what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I mean, he was using a story from the book of Acts, and because Paul, you know, and Barnabas were godly men, and godly men disagree, but godly men also sin. And I think it was a sin when Paul split with Barnabas because they were not promoting unity, but disunity. And so it's the same with this, with demons. You know, we see examples in the book of Acts and in the Gospels of demons being cast out, but does that mean that is what we're supposed to do? Now, it could be, but how would I know that? What would I need to find that would tell me that that's how I'm supposed to deal with demons, spiritual warfare? What kind of a passage would I need to find for that?
We have to find a command, direct command of the Lord. So
Exactly.
a
A
prescriptive
prescriptive passage, right?
that
And these are, for the most part, the epistles, right?
Yeah.
And here we have in Ephesians 6, this is instructive. This is prescriptive. Paul here is telling us, how do you fight demons? Because he uses the word struggle. Struggle is fight, battle, wrestling, I think is the word, right? It comes from the word that had to do with wrestling. So it's a physical battle. So he's not denying that we will face demons and that we will struggle against them. But notice here, what's the prescription? How do we deal with those demons? Do we cast them out? Do we bind them? Do we send them in pigs? Well, he says
we begin,
one.
We
Go ahead.
begin with be strong, but in my study, when I studied that portion of scripture, what really changed my mind from considerations of the Kenneth Copeland type of spiritual warfare was when I went into the word study of that phrase. It was imperative, but it was in the passive mood. It was present, imperative, but in the passive mood. So it is really being strong in the sense of us being strong in the Lord, not really being strong on our own initiative. That is what changed me, Pastor Tim. Let me just relate that. It was the passive tense that opened my mind to it. When I saw that, if it was in the active tense, then I should be taking the initiative perhaps. But the passive tense, that was the big point. That was the turning point of my perspective in regards to spiritual warfare.
Yeah, that's a great insight, because it's not something that I'm doing, it's something that's done to me. And so, I mean, that's one key point there. Be strong. And then the second one is it is, the second command is in the active, but notice the command is put on the armor. It's not cast out the demon. Okay? If we do these two things, be strong in the Lord and put on the full armor of God, Paul says, so that, subordinating conjunction, so that you will be able to stand firm. That's how we stand firm. And then he goes on in verse 13, stand firm. Therefore, take up the full armor of God. Yeah.
If I may add also, when I went into put on the full armor of God and then looked at the all of the armor, all of them are defensive weapons. It is for defense. It is not mainly for offense. It's for defense. Even the sword is not to brandish it for offense, but to defend ourselves from basically to defend ourselves from the attack of the evil one.
Yeah.
And then it's followed by stand. And that sealed the nail on the thing. No? Stand firm is passive.
And he tells us in verse 14, all those pieces of armor, notice they're introduced by participles. Having, put on, having, taking up. You guys see that? So those are all the way that we stand firm. How do you stand firm? By binding and casting out? No, Paul says you stand firm by putting these pieces of armor on. And then, of course, you go into, well, what do these pieces of armor represent, and how does that's the application part of it. But yeah, but I think you look at this passage, and there's a few others where in Peter, for example, he talks about resisting the devil, and he says there, how do we resist the devil? By humbling ourselves under God. He doesn't talk about binding and casting. If you look at all the passages in the epistles that deal with spiritual warfare, none of them endorse, identifying a demon. None of them even talk about speaking to a demon.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to do that, but it's not the prescription for dealing with demons. The prescription is given in these epistles about finding our strength in the Lord, putting on this armor of God. There's this, again, in Peter, he says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. And the context there, though, is how we do that is by humbling ourselves under the mighty hand of God. James, the same thing. He talks about resisting the devil, and then he brings in this idea of humility and following the Lord. Right? Those are the prescriptions. Yeah.
Was it in Jude where he said that even Michael the archangel did not rebuke the devil?
Yeah.
Himself. It was in Jude, right?
Yeah. In Jude. And there again, a prescriptive passage, right? In the epistle. But yeah, as an example, he said even Michael, who's the most powerful angel, next to Satan, did not rebuke Satan on his own. He said, the Lord rebuke you. But yeah, I hear these guys all the time. They're saying, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus and command you to come out, and I bind you, Satan. And they're doing all of this. And I don't see anywhere, any passage that prescribes that. Okay. Now, there are some examples in narratives where those events take place, but we have to remember those are special cases, the Lord Jesus Christ and the apostles, and we're not either one of those people. So we want to be careful. Just because it happened doesn't mean that's what we're supposed to do. It could mean that, but we would know by finding a prescriptive passage that tells us to do that. Okay? Any questions on that or other comments? I know this doesn't have much to do with conjunctions, but I think it's important.
It's very important, Pastor Tim.
But we're actually
It has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with conjunction, but it connects.
Yeah, in a way it does have something to do with conjunctions, but because the conjunctions are telling us here, that's how we started this. How do we stand firm against the schemes of the devil? By being strong in the Lord and putting on the full armor. So this shows us the power of understanding that this is a subordinating conjunction, because it's telling us exactly how we can stand firm against Satan when he attacks us. All right. Okay.
That understanding, Pastor Tim, very crucial.
Yeah, I think so.
Search in the Lord,
Yes.
of the Lord, the full armor of God.
Of God.
In the, yeah.
Yeah, good observations. Okay, well, let's keep, let's see, where were we here? All right. I think was it verse 13? Yeah. All right, Alan, I think we were still with you on this. So take us through. Do you see any coordinating conjunctions?
Take up the food. Yeah, therefore, so that, and
Okay.
those three.
All right, so and we know is coordinating because it's part of and boy. All right, and what's the and joining here?
Sa participle.
Yes.
And having done everything.
Well, here's an interesting. This is a little tricky, actually. It looks like it's joining this participial phrase, doesn't it? Because that's what comes after it. But actually, what it's joining is
Stand firm.
To stand firm.
See that? Again, remember, guys, coordinating conjunction, by definition, a coordinating conjunction joins words, phrases, or clauses that are, here's the key, grammatically equal. To stand firm and to resist. Those are both, we haven't talked about infinitives, we will later, but it's not joining to resist with, it's not joining, so this means that it can't be joining having done everything with to resist, right?
Pastor,
Those are grammatically
equal.
different. Yeah, if I think it's joining this phrase, having done everything, what do I need to look for then? What would it be joining it to?
Looking for another participle.
Yes. Then I need to find the other participle it is joining it to. Right? Because the key here is grammatically equal. All right? So again, just knowing what kind of conjunction it is helps guide me as to where it connects. And I know, even though this phrase, having done everything, comes right after the conjunction, in this case, it's a phrase that was inserted by Paul in between the two things he's connecting. He's connecting to stand firm, I'll highlight it in a different color, with to resist. And he's squeezing in this participial phrase, which is modifying this to stand firm, but it's
Pastor Tim.
you guys see that?
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Pastor Tim.
yeah,
I
Bobby.
was about to say a while back that I'm led to think that the main sentence beginning in verse 10 is stand firm. It seems like that's the main thought because of the way he concludes now in verse 13.
Well, notice, here's what's interesting, right? Yeah, stand firm, he repeats. We see it here, we see it here, and then we see it in the form of a command here. But notice, the two times before, it's connected to this subordinating conjunction so that, right? Two commands, be strong, put on the full armor, so that you'll be able to stand firm. And then he says, therefore, take up the full armor of God so that you'll be able to resist and to stand firm. And then he says, stand firm. You see the difference? The first two times, it's a result, like Alan said earlier. The first, be strong,
Okay.
put on the full armor, so that, resulting in, you'll be able to stand firm. And then verse 13, take up the full armor. That's basically the same idea as put on the full armor. Take up the full armor so that you'll be able to resist and to stand firm. And then he starts verse 14 with a command, stand firm. In this context, he's telling us to stand firm, we must basically be strong, put on the full armor, take up the full armor, and then he explains what that armor is after verse 14. So really the idea, stand firm is the key. That's, I think, the theme. But the idea is, it's not just me, okay, I'm just going to stand firm here. I'm going to fight Satan. Right? Because I'm going to stand firm. Well, no, there's some things that has to happen to me that will equip me, enable me to stand firm. And that is by putting on the armor of God and finding my strength in the Lord. That's what will allow me to stand firm. And he gives the details of what that armor is in verses 14 through 17.
So, Pastor Tim, since we're at this point, let me take the opportunity to ask. So when we are developing the title, we can draw from the theme, okay? As you were saying, all right? It seems that the theme there is standing firm, but that's the point is, as you said, okay? It is being strong in the Lord, putting on the full armor of God. But when we get to the title, that's one consideration we can make in trying to develop a title.
Yeah, the theme, you mean? What the focus is?
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly I would say if stand firm was your title, I would support that. But we want to make sure we help the people understand how Paul explains how do we stand firm in the text. Well, it has to come from being strong
So
in the
all,
Lord and putting on the armor
so
of
all
God.
those commands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all those commands are actually aiming for all believers to stand firm. It's so that we will stand firm, so that we will be able to withstand all the onslaughts coming from our spiritual enemy.
Yes.
And
So
I'm
Pastor
coming to believe that. Uh, of course, I'm not really sure, but I think Paul is considering the truth about God having the control, because I was thinking of Job. Um, he was able to overcome all those attacks coming from the evil one because of him being able to stand firm, and all the attacks coming from our spiritual enemy was allowed by God. It's under the control of God, the permission of God. So that's why it's very important for us to stand firm,
Yeah.
that we stand firm in the Lord,
Yeah.
because He has it under control.
Yeah, it's the idea of, we must fight the battle, but we fight the battle the way God tells us to fight, and we depend on him in that fight. It reminds me of, there's several illustrations of this in the Old Testament where God wanted to teach his people to depend on him. You remember 2 Chronicles
7:14.
No, I was thinking of
Jehoshaphat, Pastor Tim?
yeah, the singing army. Is that chapter 7?
Jehoshaphat, yeah.
Where God tells him, okay, basically, I will give you the victory. And so he tells Jehoshaphat to put the singers, the choir, in the front.
Mm.
You remember this story? And so
Yeah.
I called it the attack of the singing soldiers, where basically he puts the church choir, out in the front, and they go to battle with these guys just singing in front. Nobody's fighting. These guys are, holy, 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 Lord, right? And all of a sudden, the enemies just gets defeated. Now, that's crazy, right? I mean, why would God do that? And other times, though, like Joshua, he told Joshua, fight. And they had to literally, take swords and spears and arrows and fight, because God told them, that's how I want you to do it. But he told Jehoshaphat, I want you to fight this battle this way. Have these guys sing, and I'll give you the victory. And so the issue is just trust God and do it the way he says to do it. That's why we want to make sure we're following prescriptive passages. We want to follow the instruction we're given. Because what if Joshua, or what if some king after Jehoshaphat said, oh, I remember the story of Jehoshaphat, and the way he won a battle was he sent out the choir to sing. So I'm going to do that. Now, what would likely happen? You send out the choir, man, they're going to get slaughtered. The key was Jehoshaphat followed the instruction that God gave him how to fight. And so
We're going to with the COVID-19 pandemic.
there you go. We're gonna sing it away. But so that's why it's so important that we identify and distinguish between descriptive and prescriptive. All right, because we just need to do the way God says to do it, whatever that is. And so there's many examples of that, right? God even at times when Joshua was taking the promised land, right? They have a situation where God sends hailstones down upon the enemy. Or remember when they had held his arms up so that the earth stood still for a day? There's all these amazing miracles. But the key is The formula is just do it how God says to do it.
Pastor Tim,
Yeah.
you're talking about Joshua. I'm reminded of that portion where the Lord, the commander of the army of the Lord appeared to him. I remember they were about to go into battle.
Yeah.
Joshua was so fired up, so intense, and then suddenly this man appeared to him, and then he began to inquire, "Are you for us or against us?" And I remember the commander said, "No, I'm not. I'm neither for you nor I'm for the Lord."
Yeah.
I think that's what he said.
Yeah, that's the point, right?
My insight to him there was maybe, just maybe, Joshua was so absorbed with the battle. It was so personal with him. He was beginning to think that it is about him.
The battle is the Lord's.
And the Lord had to appear to him and tell him, no, this battle is mine.
Yeah, the commander. Armies of the Lord. Yeah, it's some amazing stories. What time do we have? All right, let's try to do
Pastor Tim, to do battle.
it's time to do battle with
kitchen.
conjunctions.
With the kitchen.
Our battle
We
is
have to continue battling the grammar.
our battle is with the grammar, yeah. Okay, so we're back to verse 13. We had therefore as is followed by take up the full armor. So that's a clause.
Followed by a clause.
So this is a subordinating conjunction, right?
Yes.
Now in this
Oh, yes.
case, it's connecting back to what he said in verses 11 and 12. Remember he said, put on the full armor of God so that you may be able to stand firm. And here he almost is repeating that idea, but he's saying based upon that, again, take up the full armor so that, and he basically is repeating himself. You will be able to resist, he adds, and to stand firm. And then so that, take up the full armor so that, again, result, you'll be able to resist. Okay? Followed by, you will be able to resist, which again is a clause. Therefore, this is subordinating conjunction. Okay?
So that is followed by.
All right? Take up the full armor so that you'll be able to resist and to stand firm. So it would look like this. If I diagrammed it, take up, that's my command. Subject you, it's not there, but it's a command, so it's implied, right? You take up, and then the object is the full armor. And then what's the result of that? Why? So you will be able to resist when?
In the evil.
In the evil day. And remember, we said it, this and is going to connect two things that are grammatically equal. Having done everything's not grammatically equal to resist, but to stand firm is.
So it's functioning as a subordinating conjunction, Pastor Tim.
The so that is, yes. But and is coordinating. It's coordinating to resist with to stand firm. And having done everything, now it's telling you,
Pastor Tim, that's a clause also, no?
having done everything,
Yeah,
technically it's a phrase.
It's a phrase. Okay.
There's no subject.
We cannot put you there.
No,
Okay.
because it's a participle.
All right.
Participles do not have a subject.
Okay.
They are typically modify another verb. In this
So
case,
you-
it's modifying to stand firm. Yes. Yeah,
is it,
Michael?
also the having done everything to you after therefore, you having done everything this, then stand firm like that.
Well, it's this
Or
participle
you
phrase is directly connected to that verb, to stand firm.
okay.
All right. Now, if he had said it up here, you, having done everything, take up the full armor of God, then your statement, I think, would be correct. But because he put it down here, then we have to consider the proximity. It's closest to these two verbs. All right.
It
So
is an adverb to stand firm.
yeah, it's modifying to stand firm. Okay.
If you want to say it is implied, the you there is implied because of the previous you. So
Well,
it does.
yeah.
Ah.
Go ahead, Sid.
It cannot be a command because it's a participle.
Yeah, this is where we need to
So you
understand.
cannot put therefore you cannot put the you because you is only used in the imperative mode. And participle cannot be used as a command. So it will not take up the subject you.
Yeah, let me here. Let me just throw this out at you, and if you guys if it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. But some of you, this may help. We have to think of verbs. There's finite verbs. Sorry, more grammar, but here we go. And non-finite verbs. Finite verbs are those verbs that we talked about that have indicative, imperative, interrogative, all these different moods. Non-finite verbs, they're called verbals, and there's three kinds. There's participle, infinitive,
Gerund.
and
Gerund.
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 Okay, these are all they have a verb in the word, but they don't function like a regular verb. Okay, these have a verb in the word or phrase, but do not function like a strictly like a verb. So for example, I could say, I walked home. Okay, that's a finite verb. It's describing, remember, and what kind of, is it indicative, imperative, interrogative?
That's indicative.
This is indicative, right?
sir.
It's making a statement.
Indicative.
Making
Yeah.
a statement.
Yes, sir.
Or I could say,
You are
walk.
informing us that you walk home.
Yeah, I'm giving you
That
information, declaration. Or I could
Walk
say
home.
walk home. That's a finite verb, and it's an imperative, right?
imperative.
Now, what if I said,
You're issuing command.
I plan to walk home.
That's
Now, what is walk
subjunctive.
doing here? Notice I added that word to. Really, the action is plan, right? What am I planning to do? To walk home. So here I'm using the verb in a different way. It's not strictly acting like a verb here.
That's an adverb. How do you want to go home?
Actually, here
How do you plan to go home?
it's
It's an
actually
adverb.
it's an object here, actually. Infinitives
Object.
infinitives are funky. Infinitives can act like an object or an adverb or an adjective. In this case, it is I plan to walk. Or you could say how would I put this? This isn't a good sentence, but walking home. I left him walking home. Now here, walking is a participle. Okay, again, the main action is left.
Left.
Walking there is an adjective describing home.
Well, in this case, I meant it to modify left, how I left.
Uh,
But yeah, this isn't a good sentence. I'm trying to think of sentences with the word walk in them to show the different ways a verb can be, or these nonverbals can be used, non-finites can be used. So all this is to say, and this is where English gets so complicated, is you can have a verb function like a normal verb, which has a finite verb has mood, tense, and voice. Okay? But a non-finite verb does not. It can have tense, or it can have a mood. One of them does, but it can't have all three. All right? It doesn't function like a regular verb. And so that's the tricky part. As we're looking at these sentences, notice here we have this verb resist. But it's not the finite verb. It's not the main verb here. The main verb is you will be able. To resist is doing something else. And I know that because of this word to that begins it. Or here, to stand firm. This is a verb, to stand. Stand is a verb, but it's not acting the same way as a regular verb here. He's not saying, therefore, stand firm. He's saying, you will be able to stand firm. And then the same with this, having. This is a participle. It's not a finite verb. It doesn't have a mood, a voice, and a tense altogether. Anyway, all this is to say non-finite verbs don't have a subject. So you don't have you here. Okay, the subject is supplied elsewhere. Now we know that this phrase is talking about you. It's part of that. You is the overall subject here of this whole verse, but this particular verb does not have a subject.
Okay.
The regular verbs, the finite verbs, take up, will be able, those have a subject. In this case, you. Because they're acting like a normal verb. But there are other kinds of verbals, non-finite verbs, that have a verb in the word, but they don't function that way. We'll have to cover that on a special focus session. So if this is confusing, or if nosebleed, and it's just, that's okay. We'll come back to this at a later time. I just thought I would mention it because some of you, I think, it may be helpful.
Pastor Tim,
Yeah.
can we also look this for just in the interlinear? Can we also do that?
Yeah.
To be sure.
Yeah. So let me see here. Let me just copy the interlinear real quick for this. Where is it? Where did it go? Wait. What? Oh, maybe on this side. Try over here. Ah, there we go. Where is it? There it is. Okay, it's what's this? Ephesians 6:13. All right. Here's the interlinear for that last phrase.
Sir Tim,
Yes,
you cannot see it in the screen.
I'm going to try to make it bigger
You
here.
just copy it.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So here's I just cut and paste this portion here. Okay. Here we have the chi. Okay, so that's the coordinating conjunction, and that's what the C stands for.
Kai, Kate.
And having worked thoroughly. So this is a verb, active, middle, and that P here stands for participle.
Okay.
If we were on the interlinear and I put the arrow over it, the cursor, it would tell you verb, active, middle, participle. So I know this verb is a participle. So having done, or literally having worked thoroughly. And then to stand firm.
Gasumay.
Yeah. Kater, let's see.
Kater
Kater gasamanoi. Kater gasamanoi, because the accent's here. All right. So it is a participle. Having done everything, it is a participle, so that the translation's correct there. So we know that part of it. So that's good to check, because it might have been something else. All right. And then to stand, it says this is a verb. And this is an infinitive, active infinitive. All right. Well, that got a little too technical there. I apologize for that.
I'm asking that, Pastor, that just in case we might forget it on how to deal with this kind of sentence, so we can also refer it to the interlinear.
Yeah, and the way you'd want to do it is to go to go to the BibleHub.com and hit interlinear, and then you can look for it that way. I just cut and paste from my interlinear that I had open. So, okay, well, after all of that, let's next week, what I'd like to do, maybe we'll move on. Let's move on to prepositions, and go back to that, and we'll circle back around. And what I'm planning to do is, after we cover the 4 types of connecting words, we'll then do an exercise where we'll look at a paragraph and then try to identify all of them. So the conjunctions, the prepositions, the participles, and the relative pronouns. So we can do all that together. So I think what would be good for us to do next week is maybe we'll do 1 or 2 more verses for the conjunctions here on Ephesians 6, and then we'll go to participles, prepositions, because those are key. But let me just go back to, I see that, amen. I see that hand, brother. I do want to go back to something I mentioned earlier, and that is memorizing a few things can be very helpful. So if you can memorize and boy,
awit, but,
and, nor, but, or, yet, those are coordinating conjunctions. And then if you can remember a with boot, right? At, with, in, from, for, by, on, of, and to. Those are the 9 most common prepositions. And then remember who, which, and that. Those are the relative pronouns. If you can memorize those,
Whichever, whatever.
yeah, those are all derivatives. Those are all, if you see the word which or who in it, then you know you've got a relative pronoun. Okay? And then,
Then prepositions, subordinating conjunctions, always, follows, no, noun. When it follows a noun, it is subordinating.
if the clause, if you have a clause which
follows a
follows,
clause, yeah.
it's subordinating.
Follows a
If you have
It's
a
subordinate.
noun, then it's going to be either a preposition or it could be a participle. Okay? Like what we saw, having done everything. Having done was my participle. Everything is a noun. Okay? So if you see a noun, then it's either a preposition or possibly a participle that's connecting it. If you see a clause, then it's a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun. And if I know my relative pronouns, who, which, that, then I can process of elimination. All right?
And then you taught us, Pastor Tim, like the end there is being followed by a participle.
Yeah,
So
and so then we've got those tricky things where don't always, English can have phrases and words moved around, right? And so can Greek, by the way. Greek often, for emphasis, may move a word or a phrase from its normal position to the beginning of a sentence in order to emphasize it.
Okay.
So that's another nuance that we have to be careful. But I want to at least start us with, generally speaking, though, usually what follows the connector word is the connector word is connecting that phrase or clause, but not always. We saw an example here where what followed the connector word actually was not what the connector word was joining when it was, and having done everything to stand firm. But what helped us there is reminding ourselves that knowing a coordinating conjunction connects two grammatically equal words, phrases, or clauses. So that's what, if I just remember that, coordinating connects what's grammatically equal. Subordinating connects a dependent clause. Always.
Subordinating always connects a.
So maybe what I'll try to do is put a summary sheet together a little later to kind of simplify.
You're going to send us the notes, Pastor Tim, right?
Yeah. Yep. I'll do that.
That's helpful.
All right. That's enough pain and suffering for today.
Pastor Tim, we want to share good news to you from the Philippines.
What's that?
Our Congress, we have now good sound system in our Congress, Pastor Tim. Because we have 2 speakers now.
Oh. Bump.
That's a surround. Surround.
What happened?
Surround speakers.
Pastor Tim, politics again.
Yeah.
Politics.
What happened?